Good evening, and thank you for joining me on the maiden voyage of FrightTime Tales. Tonight we're going to take a look at the darker side of sailing the ocean. What follows is part 1 of Unmanned by Chad Austin. As you might have already guessed, the origin of the term ghost ship has very little to do with ghosts. It was used to refer to ships found at sea without crews. In the early ages of maritime travel, it wasn't unheard of to find a derelict whose crew was washed out to sea by a savage storm or ravaged by the plague. In the mind of the superstitious mariner, however, this suggested all sorts of outrageous stories. Tales of seafaring monsters and sirens luring unfortunate sailors to their doom were all too prevalent, overshadowing the more likely causes of piracy and sickness. I don't doubt the spreading of such ridiculous tales was due in part by those who wished to scare others off the lucrative field of maritime salvage. Even a small ship could net a lucky crew a tidy sum, not including the boat's cargo. Knowing this, how could these silly stories of haunted boats and their spectral crew sound like anything more than a clumsy attempt to keep you from a fair reward? I personally could never believe these sorts of stories. I knew that these kinds were meant for children and not a rational person like a true sailor should be, but they did interest me. It was fascinating to hear what wicked tales some fanciful mind had cooked up and decide just what could have really happened. I never liked the retelling of such folk tales, for the spread of these stories only served to make crews more skittish. I instead loved to dissect them and understand what makes us such a superstitious lot. I thought I understood the mind of my fellow sailor, all the intricate little beliefs and fears that made us human. All it took was one simple story to make me realize my own arrogance. I'm going to break one of my own rules by telling it to you, but try to understand. This is more for your benefit than mine. Take from it what you will, but don't think for a moment that I'm just trying to frighten you with silly ghost stories. It doesn't matter whether or not the tale is real, just that you understand the underlying message. There once was a young man who had grown up in poverty and wanted nothing more than to escape his hard life on land for a far more adventurous one at sea. At the age of 16, he ran away and joined the crew of a tramp steamer out of New York. Of course, he had to lie about his age, but the captain understood his situation. The shifting waves of the open ocean are far less hospitable to a man's stomach than that of solid ground. It was a harsh adjustment for the boy, but he managed admirably. As the newest crew member, he had a great many things to prove, and the best way to prove them was to take any and every job asked of him. Unfortunately, these jobs were always the least desirable ones. Often tedious and sometimes dangerous, the boy willingly accepted any challenge offered him. I don't mean to say he didn't enjoy his work. Being worked to the bone afforded him little time to himself, and night watch on deck gave him ample time for that. He'd often find himself lost in thought as he paced about the deck, staring out over the inking black waters. There was never anything to see upon the lapping waves but darkness, and it made him feel as if nothing existed beyond what he could see in the ship's running lights. It was on one such night that the boy found it. He actually heard it before he saw it. The sound mingled with the crash of waves against the hull, giving it a strangely musical tone. It was like this stretching of metal upon metal, but conducted by an orchestra. A strange and lonely yearning call. Or so thought the fanciful mind of a boy not yet a man. In the direction of the sound, he could see the faint lights in the distance. Though it hadn't been foggy that night, the water particles in the air made the light look gaseous and unnatural. As you can imagine, the boy's fancy was excited by the sight. Though he didn't believe in ghosts or monsters at sea, he was by no means uncurious. As the ship neared the light, the boy saw that he wasn't looking at his first spirit, but the running lights of a boat slightly larger than his own. Rocking perilously at the mercy of the waves, he couldn't see a single soul on deck. Its surface was covered in rust and detritus left from waves above the deck line. As it bobbed up and down the unforgiving sea, the boy realized the creaking hull of the derelict was causing the strange musical tones. From just a single sight of the thing, he knew something was very wrong. His call for alarm had drawn the attention of not only the crew still awake, but those half sleeping as well. Within a minute's time, over 20 men, including the captain and first mate, stood staring at the lifeless ship as it bobbed upon the waves. Amidst the flurry of excited discussion, the boy caught words like survivors and salvage, but he could not tear his eyes away from the thing. It moved almost hypnotically on the ocean, and the creaking musical notes began to develop a hauntingly ominous quality. He thought it was almost pleading. When the boy mentioned it to the other men, no one paid it any attention. It didn't take long to pull the ship up beside the derelict and lash the two together with rope. The abandoned ship seemed undamaged for the most part, and had no trouble floating. Being the one who had first spotted the vessel, the boy's captain eagerly volunteered him for the first party to board it. He was understandably nervous about setting foot on the ship, but his duty was clear. 10 men armed with flashlights flooded the empty deck in search of survivors. The boy stuck to the protective side of his captain, though outwardly he tried to put on a tough face. As much as he hoped to find anyone alive, the searching party found no one. Oh, they found plenty of signs of life, but not one living soul. Clothes left thrown on bunks as if they had been changed and tossed aside in a hurry. Food left uneaten in the galley to collect mold. He'd even spotted a few mouse traps and droppings, but not one furry little stowaway could be located. The boatswain suspected the crew had abandoned ship due to fear of disease or piracy, but they found no lifeboats missing. Other theories floated about the crew as they searched, but the boy noticed no one seemed worried about the state of the ship, or of the mounting intensity of the musical creaking. After finding nothing in the crew quarters, and officially deciding that their expedition was no longer rescue but salvage, they moved greedily to the hold. Though it was damp, the cargo seemed mostly intact. The boy didn't know what most of it was, but the captain seemed quite excited by their find. The rest of the searchers seemed pleased and completely oblivious to the booming metallic scraping that echoed in his ears since he'd stepped onto the damned ship. It had never been this loud. There was no doubt in his mind that the musical creaking came from here, the belly of the ship. The boy had to slap his hands to his ears to shut it out. "Why can't you hear it?" he bellowed as he sunk to the floor. "Don't you see it's not safe here?" But no one listened to him. They were all old veterans of the sea. They did not fear the old tales. Nor did they fear the rantings of a child pretending to be a man. He yelled and grew violent in his attempt to make the sailors leave. When they tried to lay hands on him, the boy threw savage punches at his assailants. It took 5 men to wrestle him to the ground and drag him back to their ship. Once there, the boy was thrown into a cell. The captain left him with a sad look on his face, placing the keys to his prison. I hope you enjoyed part 1 of Chad Austin's Unmanned, and I do hope you'll join us next time with part 2. Until then, I do hope that you'll stay safe and keep an ear out for more FrightTime Tales.